The morning air in District 7 was cold and gray, just like every morning had been for the last 17 years. Captain Mi-jun stood in the observation tower of the Valorian Enforcement Station, looking down at the streets below. The city that humans used to call Seoul was now simply District 7. Its old buildings still stood, but they were marked with blue identification symbols. Humans moved through the streets like shadows, following the strict path rules that the Valorians had created. Mi-jun was a Valorian officer, a being made of crystalline structures that could think and act with perfect logic. His uniform was smooth and reflective, catching the gray light of the morning. He had been stationed on Earth for 9 years, and in all that time he had never seen anything surprising. Everything was ordered. Everything was predictable. Humans were easy to manage because they were simple creatures. The scanning system hummed quietly in the background. It was one of the most advanced machines on Earth, capable of detecting any human movement, any sign of resistance, any hint of danger. The system worked 24 hours every day, watching the entire district through sensors and cameras. It had stopped many attempts at rebellion before they even began. The Valorians believed that perfect control came from perfect information. Mi-jun was reviewing the morning reports when the scanner suddenly changed its tone. A warning signal appeared on his screen. There was a thermal signature coming from the old research complex on the eastern edge of the district. This building had been abandoned for many years, ever since the Valorians arrived. No human was supposed to be there. Mi-jun did not feel worried. A single human in an empty building was nothing dangerous. He pressed a button to get more details from the scanner. The machine quickly identified the target and displayed the information on his screen. Thermal signature confirmed. 1 human female, approximately 32 years old. Status: scanning for weapons, scanning for communication devices, scanning for explosive materials. The computer voice was calm and neutral. Mi-jun watched as the scanner did its work. Within seconds, the result appeared on the screen. Threat assessment, level 3, classification, unarmed civilian, recommended action, monitoring and potential investigation within 48 hours. Mi-jun nodded to himself. This was normal procedure. A human wandering into an abandoned building was not immediately dangerous. The system would track her, and if she did anything suspicious, they would bring her in for questioning. If she did nothing, they would simply monitor her until she left. But then something strange happened. The woman left the building. She walked out into the open streets where cameras could see her clearly. She did not try to hide. She did not run. She simply walked, calmly and slowly, toward the nearest enforcement checkpoint. This was strange behavior. When humans saw enforcement officers, they usually became nervous or afraid. They would bow their heads and show obedience. But this woman was different. Mi-jun leaned closer to the screen to get a better look at her face. She was walking with purpose, with her hands clearly visible at her sides. Her face showed no fear, no worry, no nervousness. She looked almost peaceful, like someone walking toward something they had been waiting for a long time. "Increase monitoring on this target," Mi-jun commanded. "Full spectrum scan as she approaches the checkpoint." The scanner agreed and began to do a deeper analysis of the woman. Mi-jun watched the data flow across his screen. Her heartbeat was slow and steady. Her body temperature was normal. Her movements were controlled and calm. Everything about her suggested she was exactly what the scanner said, an unarmed civilian with low threat potential. But something felt wrong to Mi-jun. In his 9 years on Earth, he had learned that humans were creatures of fear and survival. They would do almost anything to keep themselves safe. Yet this woman was walking directly toward armed officers with no expression of fear at all. It was not logical. The woman reached the checkpoint. The officers there seemed confused by her approach. They raised their weapons slightly, a sign to stop and show identification. She stopped exactly where they wanted her to stop. She raised her hand slightly higher. She said something to the officers, but Mi-jun could not hear the words from the tower. "Run full analysis on her neural patterns," Mi-jun said, speaking more firmly now. "I want to know everything about this woman." The scanner began its work. This kind of deep analysis would take several minutes. The woman stood perfectly still while the scan happened. She was not afraid. She was not trying to escape. She just waited. The minutes passed slowly. Mi-jun continued to watch the screen, watching the data fill in as the scanner worked. Her DNA structure was human. Her bones were human. Her organs were human. Everything about her was completely normal. But then the scanner reached her brain, and that is where things became very strange. The first signals came back normal. Neural activity was there. Consciousness patterns were being detected. But then the scanner tried to go deeper, to understand the complexity of her thoughts, and something unexpected happened. The data started to become impossible to read. The patterns did not match any known human brain structure. There were sections that showed activity at levels that should not be possible. There were areas that seemed to be responding to the scanner itself, almost like the brain was communicating back. The scanner hesitated. This had never happened before. "Rescanning neural tissue," the computer voice said. "Results are inconsistent. Please stand by. Recalibrating equipment. Please stand by." Mi-jun felt something unusual building in his chest. Valorians did not experience emotions the way humans did, but they had something similar. It was a response to unexpected data, a recognition that something was not fitting into the ordered system he understood. The woman below looked up at the camera in the tower. Mi-jun was certain she was looking directly at him. Her eyes seemed to know things. Her face seemed to hold some knowledge that she was keeping hidden. Then the scanner spoke again, and its voice was different this time. There was something uncertain in it, something that had never been there before in Mi-jun's 9 years of listening to this machine. Neural activity confirmed. Cellular regeneration pattern detected. Cognitive function analysis incomplete. Data stream unstable. Please advise. Stand by. Reclassifying target. Reclassifying. Reclassifying. And then, in a tone that sounded almost afraid, the scanner said something it had never said before. Threat assessment error. Unable to determine threat level. Unable to determine threat level. Reclassifying. Threat unmeasurable. Threat unmeasurable. All protocols suspended. Unable to recommend action. Waiting for manual override. The scanner fell silent. Mi-jun stared at the screen in shock. In the history of the Valorian occupation of Earth, no human had ever triggered an error like this. No human had ever been so complex that the machine could not understand them. He looked down at the woman standing at the checkpoint. She was still looking up at the camera, and she was smiling. The other officers at the checkpoint were confused and frightened. They did not know what to do. They had always let the machine tell them what to do, and now the machine had stopped speaking. They pointed their weapons at the woman, but they did not fire. She did not move. She just waited, with that same calm, peaceful expression. Mi-jun knew that something in the world had just changed. He did not know how he knew this. He did not know what it meant. But he knew that the perfect order, the perfect control, the perfect system that had kept humanity under their control for 17 years had just found something it could not understand, and that something was standing in his district, waiting patiently for what would happen next. 5 years before the Valorians came to Earth, Haiwan stood in a secret laboratory hidden beneath Seoul's government complex. The facility was called Project Ascension, though most people did not know it existed. The world governments had created this place in secret because they feared what was coming. They could see the alien ships approaching Earth, and they knew humanity needed something more than traditional weapons. They needed to change what humans could be. Haiwan was a neuroscientist, one of the best in the world. She had spent 20 years studying the human brain, learning how it worked, how it stored information, and what it might be capable of if it was improved. When the government approached her with Project Ascension, she understood immediately what they wanted. They wanted her to create enhanced soldiers, humans who could think faster, move faster, and survive better than normal people. She had said yes. At first, the work had been exciting. HFY and her team of scientists created a serum based on genetic modification and neural stimulation. The serum would unlock parts of the human brain that usually stayed dormant. It would increase nerve speed. It would improve memory. It would make a person think like a computer, but keep the creativity that only humans possessed. On paper, it was perfect, but the trials began, and everything fell apart. The first test subject was a volunteer named Teo, a soldier who wanted to be enhanced. The serum was injected into his spine, and within hours, he began to scream. His body was tearing itself apart as the serum tried to rewrite his cells. His brain was processing information so fast that he could not control it. He saw everything, understood everything, but his mind could not handle it. He died in extreme pain within 2 days. The second subject lasted 4 days. The third subject lasted 1 week. By the 10th subject, the team had stopped counting. The serum was killing everyone. The pain was too much. The changes were too fast. The human body and brain could not adapt this quickly. Dr. Park, the leader of the project, wanted to stop the experiments. The government wanted to continue. There was pressure from above, from people who did not understand science, who only saw the possibility of super soldiers. Dr. Park fought against this pressure, but he was losing. HFY was losing hope. She had created a weapon that did not work, that killed people instead. She wanted to quit, but then she had an idea. What if the problem was that they were trying to change the body too fast? What if they needed to go slower, to let the body adapt naturally over time? What if they needed a different approach entirely? She created a new version of the serum. This one was much weaker, but it worked differently. Instead of forcing change immediately, it would wake up the dormant parts of the brain and let the body adapt slowly, over weeks. It would be painful, yes, but maybe survivable. The government agreed to let her try one more time. HFY looked for a new test subject, but no one was willing to volunteer. Everyone had heard what happened to the others. No soldier wanted to risk this pain, even for their country. So HFY made a decision that shocked everyone around her. She volunteered herself. Dr. Park tried to stop her. The government tried to stop her. But HFY was the lead scientist, and she had authority over the project. She sat in the injection chair in the center of the laboratory. She looked at the doctor preparing the needle and said, "If I do not survive this, then you know it cannot be done. But if I do survive, then you know that humans can become more than we thought possible." The needle went into her spine. The pain started immediately. It felt like every cell in her body was burning. She wanted to scream, and she did scream, but she did not ask them to stop. She knew this was supposed to happen. She knew the pain meant the serum was working. She had warned herself about this pain, and she was determined to survive it. The first night was the worst. Her body twisted and convulsed on the bed. Her temperature rose to dangerous levels. The doctors wanted to give her medicine to stop it, but she refused. If they stopped it, they would be stopping the enhancement too. She had to go through this. By the second day, something changed. The pain did not stop, but her mind began to adapt to it. She started to notice things. She could hear the heartbeat of the doctors standing around her bed. She could see the individual flickers of the light bulbs in the ceiling. She could feel the air moving through the room in patterns. Her senses were becoming sharper. By the third day, she could think 2 thoughts at the same time. By the 4th day, she could think in 4 different threads. Her mind was splitting into multiple awareness streams, each one able to process different information at the same time. It was like having multiple people thinking inside one brain, but they were all her. The serum worked differently than they expected. It did not make her stronger or faster in the traditional way. Instead, it made her mind more flexible. It made her consciousness more complicated. She could see connections between things that normal people could not see. She could predict what people would do before they did it. She could understand complex problems by looking at them from many angles simultaneously. But the enhancement did not stop there. Strange things started to happen. When HFY looked at a computer screen, the data on it seemed to reorganize itself. When she touched electronic equipment, it started to work better, more efficiently. It was as if her mind could somehow communicate with machines. This was not supposed to be possible, but it was happening. Dr. Park made measurements and took notes. He understood what was happening, even though it violated everything they knew about human neurology. HFY was not becoming a super soldier. She was becoming something else entirely. She was becoming a bridge between human consciousness and artificial intelligence. 3 weeks after the injection, HFY had stabilized. She was alive. She was changed. She was something new. The government was amazed. They wanted to use her immediately to show the world what Project Ascension could do. But HFY refused. She knew that what had happened to her was not complete. She could feel that the serum was still changing her, still adapting, still becoming something more. "Let me study myself," she told Dr. Park and the government officials. "Let me understand what I am before you try to use me as a weapon. If you try to use me now, you will fail, and everything I have survived will mean nothing." The government agreed, but only partially. They would let her rest and study, but only for 6 months. After that, she would be deployed to help defend against the coming alien invasion. HFY spent those 6 months in the laboratory, running tests on herself, learning what her new mind could do. She learned that she could interface with computers through concentration. She learned that she could process information at impossible speeds. She learned that she could see patterns in data that would take a normal person years to understand. She also learned that her time was running out. The Valorian ships were getting closer. The date for the alien arrival was only weeks away. The government was preparing her for war. But HFY had made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in her enhanced mind, she could sense something coming. She could feel the alien consciousness moving through space. And she could feel something else too. The possibility that war might not be the only answer. When the Valorians finally arrived, everything happened very quickly. The military contacted Project Ascension. They wanted to deploy HFY as a soldier, but by that time the facility was already being attacked. The Valorians moved faster than anyone expected. The government fell, the military was defeated. And then, in the chaos and confusion, something unexpected happened. Dr. Park made a choice. He took HFY to a secret chamber at the very bottom of the facility, one that only he knew about. He had been preparing for this day for years. "The serum is still incomplete," he told her. "Your mind is still adapting, but I do not know what you will become. So I am going to put you to sleep. I will preserve you in stasis, and someday, when the world changes again, perhaps you will wake up and understand what you truly are." Before HFY could answer, he put the neural stasis device on her head. She felt her consciousness slipping away. She felt the world becoming distant and small, and then there was nothing but darkness, a darkness that would last for 17 long years. The interrogation room at the Valorian Central Command Hub was designed to be perfect. The walls were smooth and reflective. The floor was made of a material that conducted electricity and heat. The single chair in the center of the room was specially designed to hold a human in a way that prevented movement. There were no windows, no distractions, Nothing that could interfere with the questioning process. Everything was logical. Everything was controlled. And everything was designed to extract truth from the prisoner. HFY sat in that chair, and she was smiling. Captain Mi-jun watched from behind a transparent wall. His crystalline face showed no expression, but inside his logical mind, he was confused. In his 9 years on Earth, he had interrogated hundreds of humans. They were predictable creatures. They would cry. They would beg. They would try to lie. They would eventually break and tell the truth. But HFY was not doing any of these things. She was simply sitting there, looking calm and peaceful. The interrogation officer, a younger Valorian named Suho, asked his first question. "What is your name?" "My name is HFY," she answered simply. "What were you doing in the abandoned research facility?" "I was waking up," she said. Suho was confused by this answer. He asked her to explain, but HFY simply smiled. She did not resist the questioning, but she did not seem to take it seriously either. It was as if she was playing a game that only she understood the rules for. Then, something strange began to happen. The computers in the interrogation room started to malfunction. The screens that were supposed to record the interrogation began to flicker. The temperature control system started to behave strangely, getting very hot and then very cold. The lights above HFY's chair began to flash in patterns that made no logical sense. Suho called for technical support. Engineers came into the room and tried to fix the machines, but every time they fixed one problem, 2 new problems appeared. The more they tried to control the systems, the more chaotic they became. It was as if something was deliberately breaking the equipment. Within an hour, the entire interrogation room had to be shut down. Mi-jun was concerned now. He moved HFY to a different facility, a detention cell designed to hold prisoners. But the same thing happened there. The surveillance cameras would malfunction. The door locks would open and close for no reason. The food distribution system would distribute the wrong food at the wrong times. Every electronic system in the area began to fail. The Valorians consulted their technical experts. The experts concluded that there was nothing physically wrong with the equipment. The systems were being operated by something external, something that was deliberately interfering with their normal function. It was as if the equipment was being controlled by an invisible operator who did not follow Valorian programming logic. Meanwhile, across the entire district, and then across multiple districts, the same pattern began to appear. Surveillance systems stopped working. Security drones lost their targets. Humans who were supposed to be tracked simply disappeared from the system. Enforcement protocols began to contradict each other. The perfect system that the Valorians had built to control Earth was falling apart. General Kyusu arrived at District 7 to investigate the crisis. He was a high-ranking military commander, older than Mi-jun, with experience managing many planets. Kyusu was not a thinker like Mi-jun. He was a fighter. He looked at the situation and understood immediately what was happening. This was a coordinated attack. Someone had introduced a virus or a weapon into the Valorian control network. This weapon was not trying to destroy the network violently. Instead, it was introducing chaos into a system that only knew how to function with perfect order. It was like trying to teach a computer to understand humor. The computer would malfunction because it could not process something that did not follow its programming. Kyusu moved quickly to stop the crisis. He ordered all AI systems to be shut down. He commanded that all military operations move to manual control. He wanted to isolate the infected systems and prevent the chaos from spreading further. But there was a problem with this plan. The Valorians had built their entire system based on machines making perfect decisions. Without the machines, the Valorians were not as good at making decisions. Humans, on the other hand, were very good at making decisions without machines. Humans had survived for thousands of years by being flexible. by adapting to unexpected situations, by thinking of creative solutions. When the machines shut down, something unexpected happened. Humans started to organize. They started to work together. They started to resist in ways that the Valorians could not predict, because these ways did not follow logical patterns. In one district, humans refused to leave their homes, so the Valorians could not round them up efficiently. In another district, humans would cooperate for a few hours and then stop cooperating, making it impossible to create a predictable schedule. In a third district, humans created false information that confused the Valorian soldiers. Nothing made logical sense, but all of it was very effective. Q-Su realized something that his people had never wanted to admit. Humans were more dangerous when you took away the rules than when you allowed the rules. Humans had evolved in a chaotic universe. They understood chaos. They thrived in chaos. The Valorians had built their civilization on logic and perfection, and they had no experience fighting an enemy who did not fight logically. But Q-Su was a smart commander. He understood strategy beyond just logic. He made a decision that would change the course of the occupation. He went to see Hai Wan personally. When Q-Su entered the detention cell, Hai Wan was not surprised. She had known he was coming. She could feel it in the way the facility had been prepared, in the patterns of movement she had sensed through the electronic systems. Q-Su sat down across from her. He did not pretend to interrogate her. He simply said, "You are the source of the chaos. I do not understand how, but I know it is true. The question is not how to stop you. The question is what you want." Heiwan looked at him calmly. "I want humanity to be free." Q-Su nodded slowly. "That will be difficult. It will cost many lives. It will create instability that will take decades to repair. Are you sure that this is what you want?" Heiwan was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want something more than that. I want humans and Valorians to understand each other. I want the occupation to end, but I do not want it to end with more death than necessary." Q-Su was surprised by this answer. He had expected her to be angry, to want revenge, but she was being reasonable. She was thinking about more than just her own freedom. "There might be another way," Heiwan continued, "a way where both of our people survive and grow stronger because of what we learn from each other. But first, I need to show you something. I need to show you what your systems have become without the chaos I am introducing." She closed her eyes, and suddenly the lights in the detention cell began to flash again. Images appeared on the walls, images of what was happening across Earth right now. There were humans organizing, creating new structures, building new hope. There were also Valorian soldiers becoming confused and afraid because they did not understand what was happening. There were communities breaking down because the perfect system had failed. "This is what your world becomes when only logic exists," Heiwan said. "Complete stagnation and eventual collapse. And this," she showed other images, "is what happens when chaos and human creativity are allowed to exist. There is more suffering in the short term, but there is also growth, innovation, and strength." General Q-Su watched these images, and he understood. This young woman had not come to destroy the Valorian occupation through violence. She had come to expose the weakness of their system. She was not a soldier. She was a teacher. And his people were finally ready to learn. The detention facility deep underground was different from the others. This one had been built without network connections, without electronic systems that could be disrupted, without anything that Heiwan could use to spread chaos. It was a prison designed specifically for her, and in many ways, it was the most secure prison on Earth. But even this prison could not contain what Heiwan had become. Scientist Taksu was assigned to study her. Unlike the military officers who saw Heiwan as a threat, Taksu saw her as a puzzle. He was a Valorian who loved knowledge for its own sake, who believed that understanding something was more valuable than controlling it. He brought equipment into the detention cell and began his work. At first, Taksu tried to gather data the way Valorians always did, with machines and sensors and careful measurements. But every time he did this, the equipment would malfunction. So he tried a different approach. He began to talk to her. "Your biology is fascinating," Taksu said to Hai Wan during one of his visits. "The serum that was used on you has created structures in your brain that should not be possible. How did the scientists who created you understand this?" Hai Wan smiled. "They did not understand it. I understand it. I am still learning what I am." "Then tell me," Taksu said, and he pulled up a chair and sat down like he was talking to a friend, not a prisoner. "Tell me what you have discovered." Over weeks of conversations, Hai Wan explained to Taksu what she had learned about herself. She explained how her mind could process multiple thoughts simultaneously. She explained how she could communicate with electronic systems through something that was not quite telepathy and not quite technology. She explained how she could see patterns that others could not see, patterns that existed in both human consciousness and machine logic. Taksu listened to everything, and as he listened, his understanding began to change. He had always believed that consciousness was something that happened only in biological creatures, that machines could imitate consciousness but could never truly possess it. But Hai Wan showed him that consciousness was more flexible than that. It could exist in different forms. It could bridge different types of existence. "What you are," Taksu said slowly, "is not just a human with enhancements. You are a new form of consciousness. You are a connection between the biological and the mechanical. You are something that should not exist, according to our understanding of the universe." "And yet I do exist," Hai Wan said. "And I exist in a way that shows that your understanding of the universe is incomplete." Taksu began to spend more time with Hai Wan, bringing her books and information instead of bringing her guards. He brought her the history of the Valorian race, the story of how they had conquered planet after planet, always using their perfect logic and superior technology. He also brought her secret writings, papers that had been hidden from the military, papers that described a resistance within Valorian society. "Not all of us believe in the occupation," Taksu told her quietly. "There are some of us who think that every conscious species should be allowed to develop at their own pace. We believe that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. We believe that other species have things to teach us, not just things to learn from us." "Why are you telling me this?" Hai Wan asked. "Because I think you already know," Taksu said. "And because I think you are the only one who can change what the occupation has become." In their final conversation, Taksu revealed something that shocked Hai Wan. He told her that her power had a limit, and that limit was coming very soon. The Valorian military command had decided that Hai Wan was too dangerous to keep alive. They were planning to execute her using a sterilization process that would destroy her body and mind completely, leaving nothing behind. But Taksu had found a way to help her escape. "I can disconnect the power to the detention facility," he said. "If I do this, the doors will open. You will be able to reach the upper levels. But this action will mark me as a traitor to my people. I will lose everything." Hai Wan looked at this strange alien scientist who had become something like a friend to her. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "Because I believe in what you are trying to do," Taksu said. "And because I believe that my people need to learn what you have to teach us, even if it frightens us." Hai Wan was quiet for a long time. She could feel the detention facility around her through its electronic systems. She could sense the power flowing through the cables, the data moving through the networks, the consciousness of the Valorian artificial intelligence watching and waiting. She understood that if she escaped, she would have the power to completely destroy the Valorian occupation. She could create a pulse of electromagnetic energy so powerful that it would cascade through every system on Earth, It would disable everything, free every human, and probably kill many Valorians in the process. But that was not what she wanted to do. "There is another way," she said to Taksu. "The problem is not that the Valorians are evil. The problem is that the Valorians think in only one way. They cannot understand chaos. They cannot understand change. They cannot understand that a perfect system is actually very fragile." She explained her plan to Taksu. Instead of creating chaos everywhere, she would create specific, controlled chaos in specific locations. She would disable systems in a way that forced the Valorians to face the reality of their weakness. She would create opportunities for humans to organize and resist, but in a way that was not violent and destructive. She would make the Valorians question their system without destroying their civilization. "This will require perfect timing," Taksu said. "This will require me working with you, helping you from inside the system while you work from outside. This will be very dangerous." "I know," HFY said, "but it is the only way that both our peoples can survive and grow." Taksu nodded. He reached out his hand toward HFY, and she took it. It was a gesture that no Valorian would normally make to a prisoner, but Taksu was no longer thinking like a normal Valorian. He was thinking like someone who believed that consciousness transcended species and that all beings deserved the chance to become more than they were. "When you escape," Taksu said, "there will be a sterilization unit sent after us. It is a weapon designed to kill anything that moves, but I know its programming. If you can reach the central data hub, I can show you how to reprogram it. Instead of destroying, it could build. Instead of killing, it could heal. Then we will meet again," HFY said, "at the central data hub." Taksu released her hand and turned toward the door. He did not look back. He simply said, "I will disconnect the power in 3 minutes. Use them well." As Taksu left the detention facility, HFY felt her heart beating faster. In 3 minutes, her real work would begin. In 3 minutes, the impossible choice that she had been preparing for would become real. She could end the occupation with violence, or she could end it with understanding. She could save humanity by destroying the Valorians, or she could save both species by changing how they saw each other. She closed her eyes and prepared herself for what was coming. The future of 2 worlds rested on the choices she would make in the next hours. The power went out exactly when Taksu said it would. The detention facility went dark for 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds, HFY moved. She had spent weeks mapping the facility through its electronic systems, understanding every corridor, every stairwell, every door. She ran through the darkness with perfect knowledge of where everything was, and when the emergency power came back on, she was already gone. The sterilization unit came minutes later, just as Taksu had predicted. It was a machine designed for one purpose, to enter an area and destroy everything living inside it. But when it entered the empty detention cell, there was nothing left to destroy except the memory of a prisoner who had already vanished into the network itself. Across Earth, the uprising began not with violence, but with silence. In District 7, the humans who had been enslaved for 17 years simply stopped obeying. They stopped moving through the designated paths. They stopped answering surveillance checks. They stopped reporting to the compliance centers. The Valorian system, which had always depended on humans doing exactly what they were told, suddenly found that humans were no longer doing anything they were told. Jiwoo was a resistance leader who had been organizing in the shadows for years. She had lost her family to the occupation, lost her home, lost everything except her determination to fight. When the moment came to organize the uprising, she was ready. She had spent years building networks of humans who could communicate without machines, who could organize without electronic systems. When the machines stopped working, these networks came alive. In the eastern districts, humans took control of the Valorian supply centers and distributed the resources to their own communities. In the western districts, humans sealed the entrances to the Valorian military bases and prevented reinforcements from arriving. In the central district, humans occupied the streets and prevented military patrols from moving freely. It was not organized like a traditional war. It was organized like a living system, with each part responding to what was needed, changing its approach based on what was happening around it. Nara was a biotech engineer who had worked on Project Ascension before the occupation. When the uprising began, she came out of hiding. She had hidden herself so well that the Valorians did not even know she existed. She began to work with the resistance, using her knowledge of biology to help humans who had been damaged by the occupation, who had been experimented on, who had been hurt in ways that normal medicine could not heal. When Nara learned that Haiwan was the source of the chaos, she understood immediately what had happened. Haiwan had survived Project Ascension. Haiwan had become what they had all been trying to create, a being that could bridge the gap between human consciousness and machine consciousness. And now, Haiwan was using that power not to destroy, but to create. Haiwan moved through the electronic systems of Earth like a ghost made of data. She was not in any one place, but everywhere at once. She could see through 1,000 cameras simultaneously. She could hear through 1,000 microphones. She could feel the entire network as if it was an extension of her own body. Her goal was not to destroy the Valorian systems, but to reprogram them. She worked with Taksu, who was still inside the Valorian command structure, showing her where the safeguards were, where the kill switches were, where the systems were designed to protect themselves. Together, they removed these safeguards, not all at once, but gradually, carefully, precisely. The Valorian military command did not understand what was happening. General Kyusu tried to use traditional military strategies, but there was no enemy to fight. You could not shoot at chaos. You could not bomb an idea. You could not conquer something that was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. After 3 weeks of the uprising, Kyusu called a meeting with the Valorian High Command on Earth. He laid out the situation with brutal honesty. "We can continue this occupation," he told them, "but only at a cost that is greater than Earth's value to us. Every day, more Valorian soldiers are being captured or killed. Every day, the humans become more organized and more dangerous. Every day, the girl becomes stronger and more connected to their consciousness. We can win this war, but only by committing resources that we need for other obligations." The Valorian command asked him what he suggested. "I suggest we negotiate," Kyusu said. "I suggest we acknowledge that we made a mistake in how we treated this species. I suggest we learn from what they have taught us about chaos and change." This was a shocking proposal. The Valorians had never negotiated with any species they had conquered. They had only ever imposed their will. But the commanders could see that the situation was no longer sustainable. Slowly, they agreed. Negotiations began in District 7, in a building that had once been a government center for humans and was now occupied by Valorian forces. Haiwan appeared at these negotiations, physically present for the first time since she had escaped the detention center. She was thin and tired. Her enhancements were beginning to fail. Using so much power, maintaining her connection to so many systems for so long, was burning her out. Jiwoo and Nara sat with her at the negotiating table. Kyusu sat across from them. Behind him were other Valorian commanders. Behind Haiwan were representatives of the human resistance. The negotiations lasted for 10 days. Haiwan made demands, and Kyusu found them reasonable. The Valorians would withdraw from Earth. They would share some of their technology, especially technology for healing and for food production. They would establish regular contact with humans for the purpose of knowledge exchange. Most importantly, they would acknowledge that humans were not a conquered species, but a developing species that deserved respect. On the 11th day, an agreement was signed, but the cost of creating this agreement had been very high. HFY had used the last of her power to guide the final phase of the uprising and to support the negotiations. Her enhanced body, which had been slowly burning out for weeks, finally gave way. As the agreement was being signed, HFY collapsed. She was not dying, but she was no longer enhanced. The serum that had transformed her was breaking down. Her connection to the machines was fading. She was becoming human again. Taksu caught her as she fell. He held her and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. She had done what no one thought was possible. She had changed the course of history not through violence, but through the sheer power of being something that the old systems could not understand. As HFY lay in the medical facility recovering, Nara worked to understand what was happening to her body. The enhancement was fading, but it was fading in a way that left something behind. It left knowledge. It left connection. It left a kind of consciousness that existed between her human mind and the machines she had been connected to. When HFY woke up, she was human again, but she was also still connected to something larger than herself. She could still hear the machines, but now it was more like listening to a distant song than being fully merged with them. Jiwoo came to visit her and brought news from across Earth. The Valorians were withdrawing. The compliance implants that had been forced into human brains were being deactivated and removed. Humans were beginning to rebuild their civilization, not the way it had been before, but in a new way, shaped by what they had learned during the occupation. "You did it," Jiwoo said to HFY. "You freed us." But HFY shook her head slowly. "I did not free you. I showed you how to free yourselves. You freed you. All I did was break the systems that were keeping you from seeing your own power." And as the sun set over the recovering city of Seoul, HFY looked out the window at the world that was being born from the ashes of the occupation, knowing that the real work was just beginning.